Jeff Hoffman is a Toronto Blue Jay, and we got to play GM for the Blue Jays and the Washington Nationals. Our final two playing GMs that we have in this offseason cycle. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. It's the Just Baseball Show. As always, it is presented by BetMGM, and today is Monday, January 13th. Coming to you a little bit later than we typically do, just because I had a crazy travel day on Sunday and arm wasn't feeling too good, and Peter had to watch football, which, understand. I totally
Four
get
and
it.
one. He
Yeah,
went four
four
and
and
one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he started 4-0, and then Jordan Love just clunker, laid an egg.
No, I think it was he needed Baker Mayfield. He
That's
needed
right. But
Baker.
he had a Packers Super Bowl thing or something.
Oh yeah. That was a season long he had. But yeah, I think he needed I was actually all in on that pick too. He had the Bucks winning, but just Baker did not look like the gamer Baker that we're used to. But we'll take playoff Pete. He was Mr. October for baseball, and now he's doing it for football too.
Why not, man? So we are going to do that. Pete's going to be back to talk DHs on Wednesday, and then we got utility players on Friday. We're getting into our positional top tens, and
Wow.
there's always going to be a corresponding article on justbaseball.com that we will be linking in the episode description. So the plan is DH on Wednesday, which is loaded now, by the way, utility on Friday, and then we get into catchers next Monday. A reminder before we get going, if you could rate and review, leave us 5 stars and, subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff. That always helps the program. How you doing? Good?
Doing well. I'm doing well. But I was gonna say, especially if they just decide to eliminate one of the largest social media app where we have a decent sized following. We would appreciate any help on the YouTube front and some other areas. The Instagram, it's been awesome seeing that grow and everything, but it's hard to match 200,000 followers plus that we've built over the last few years on TikTok. So if that ends up going, yeah, would very much appreciate the help of sharing the show, following us on other social media platforms, and leaving us a rating and all that good stuff. But otherwise, no, doing great. The top tens are always fun. Was a little bit more excited and jazzed up for it this year. I don't know why. Like sometimes I get a little bit annoyed of trying to split the hairs between really good and really good.
Yeah.
But I felt like this year, because we have some young players coming up, we have some veterans that are kind of on the back end of their career, and then we have some semi-established players that kind of took that step into stardom.
Yeah.
I felt it was more fun than it's been the last few. Not that it's ever not fun, but more fun
Right.
than ever to rank these players this year, just because I think I was just excited to have an opinion on this more fluid top 10 at a lot of different positions.
I think there's a wrinkle in each of the positions where it's like third base, where does Junior Caminero fall? And where does Austin
Exactly.
Riley fall after injury? Catcher, I saw MLB Network's list and I'm like, why the hell is Cal Raleigh six? Like, I think Cal Raleigh has a case for one. So it's things like that. First base, you've got Harper, Freeman, and Vladdy. How do you stack those three? Center field, where do you put Mike Trout? Starting pitcher, where is Skeens as it relates to Skubal and Wheeler? There are so many questions within each category that I'm fascinated to see how it all breaks down. And we've got our three main editors, Ryan Finkelstein, Leo Morgenstern, Eric Churton, and then me, you, and Peter as the voting committee. And we just average out our lists, and that's how we get to our rankings. I'm really curious to see not only, where you put it, but like where the other four guys put it as well, because that'll decide if Skeens is the best pitcher in baseball, or if Skubal's the best pitcher in baseball, or if Clase is the best reliever in baseball.
And what I love too beyond that is you have like, I mean, the catching position. I love that you mentioned it, just spurred a thought in my mind immediately. I think the first time we did this, JT Realmuto was probably number one,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
one or two. And not because he's completely fallen off a cliff, but because of the youth movement that we've seen at this position, there's going to probably be guaranteed 7, 8 guys at least ahead of him, and they're all 27 years old or younger. Like
yeah.
they're all kids. So that's the fun part about this. And you look at a lot of different positions. That wrinkle of the young talent coming in. And we've talked about on the show a bunch of like the future of the game is in a good spot with where talent is headed and this just influx of young talent that we have. And I think this top 10 series is going to really highlight that.
Yeah, and again, we start with that with DHs on Wednesday, but we are going to get into Hoffman, the Blue Jays, and the Nats in a moment. How about this from Shams, though? LiAngelo Ball has signed a deal with Def Jam and Universal Music Group. $8 million guaranteed, could escalate to $13 million. I might swerve in that corner. Whoa, dude, that's a good song.
It's breaking the internet, man. That's awesome stuff. I love that. People were saying like LeVar Ball's 3 for 3 now, right? He's
I
got
think
two
so.
NBA kids, and Leandro was looking like the odd man out for a little bit. Now he's got a major record deal.
That's crazy. He just got
Oh
$8
man.
million guaranteed for that song.
Oh gosh. No, he's got another one on the way. He's got another one on the way.
Yeah. And well,
I
and
think Can
Lonzo
You
just started
Please?
his first game in 4 years, which fired me up. Like, this is awesome, man.
Yeah, the Ball brothers are in a good spot. That's good stuff. I was trying to see if I could find like the streaming numbers on that for the last word, but now we got that out of the way. I'll find a different last word if we have one.
I've got a last word actually too that I'm willing to float your way. But let's talk about Jeff Hoffman here. And Jeff Hoffman just signed a 3-year, $33 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. And my initial reaction was, oh, this is a steal. Like, I love this for them. And there are incentives. There are $500,000 incentives for each barrier that he gets to when it comes to innings pitched. Like, I think it's what, 60, 70, 80, and 90 innings. He gets $500,000 when he reaches each threshold. So that incentivizes him to make his return to the starting rotation, which, we've talked about a little bit earlier on in the offseason. It's something that he really wanted to prioritize, an opportunity to possibly work back into starting pitching. And the deal is very similar to what Jordan Hicks signed last year. Hicks
Yeah.
signed 4 for 44 with San Francisco. Hoffman signed 3 for 33 with Toronto. So my initial reaction was, that's awesome because Hoffman has been A, more available, and B, better in the last 2 years than Hicks was in his 2 years going into that deal. Granted, Hoffman is 4 years older than Jordan Hicks was when he signed the deal, but I started to get concerned. And it's not because there was an agreement in place with Baltimore and it fell through because of a failed physical. It's because at noon today, on Monday, I saw Mark Bowman of MLB.com put out that he also had an agreement in place with Atlanta, and that fell through because of a failed physical. If it was just one, it's like, okay. But the fact that he had agreements with both Baltimore and Atlanta, and those fell through, I start to get a little more concerned than I was when I first saw when he put pen to paper.
Yeah, and Baltimore, even though this was something that kind of started with the previous ownership in terms of being very, very particular with the medicals and things like that, I think it's still something that we've seen the Orioles be a little bit more cautious with. The Braves absolutely are cautious with that side of things as well. So you're hoping that it's two teams that typically just err on the side of caution. But we've seen this before, right? Where on a much grander scale, when multiple teams have questions about the physical, generally multiple, world-renowned doctors are probably going to be on a decent track to citing some reasonable concern. Of course, there's always reasons why players can just pitch fine, and I mean, how long has Luis Castillo been on the injury concern, you know, I guess watch list?
Some
I mean, it's
models
literally
predict that he was going to blow out what 2 years ago.
I mean, he has a UCL clause. Like so, like there's been a lot of concern there, and he's been fine, and he's just thrown and thrown and thrown and thrown. So sometimes guys just it looks worse than it is. But I mean, we saw it with Correa, and like it turned out to be pretty valid, right? He has continued to deal with lower body and foot and calf and whatever issues. So the big I wouldn't be as concerned about it if he was just being used as a reliever, but the idea of transitioning to starter after two yellow to red flag, I would say red flag if they nix the deal, two red flagged physicals, that is a little bit of a concern, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. Now, if this doesn't blow up in their face, and I'm hoping that it doesn't because I appreciated the Blue Jays putting money here, my thought on the on field is actually going to be formulated based on a question that I'm asking you, and it's a non rhetorical question. What is the separator of value between Jeff Hoffman and Jordan Hicks? Like, was
Hmm.
it age? And if it was only age, how much is that a factor?
I think age and ability to get ground balls were like with Hoffman, I think a lot of his effectiveness comes from the swing and miss. Whereas Jordan Hicks, at least, he's throwing that heavy sinker,
Yep.
and he's going to be able to, presumably, when you're trying to envision this transition into the rotation,
Yeah.
a guy that's going to be able to get ground balls, right? And so the difference is though Hicks doesn't get a ton of whiff at all,
Right.
right? 96 punchies in 109 and 2/3 innings, but when we saw him in shorter spurts in relief, he was striking out a lot of guys. It was 81 and 65 and 2/3. But I think just the floor as a starter is generally, I think, perceived to be higher when you have a guy that's going to get ground balls north of a 50% clip.
Yep.
Whereas Hoffman, it's like he's a fly ball pitcher
Yep.
that's going to get a ton of chase and whiff. That's great. But if he's not getting the same level of chase and whiff, then the floor kind of drops off, like the bottom drops off from there. Whereas Hicks, you could say, okay, he could pitch to contact and
Right.
and work his way through lineups.
Right. And what has made Hoffman better? Like Hoffman has several years as a major league starter where he was very disappointing and just barely getting by versus Hicks. This was a guy that started through the minor leagues and then got to the big leagues and was a great reliever, and then he couldn't really find the strike zone, but as soon as he started to find it again, I think teams gained confidence in his ability to start games. Hoffman, like the way he's gotten better is by a concrete tick up and by upping his slider usage. He went
Yep.
from 4 to 7. Like that's the big difference here with Jeff Hoffman. He was a not very good starter or swingman when he was when he was a starting pitcher with Colorado, with Cincinnati, or as a reliever with Cincinnati. And then he goes to Philly, and 94 turns into 96.5 or 97 this past year. And the slider usage goes from non existent, I think, pre 2022 to now 50%. It's his go to pitch. So, like,
Yep.
this guy reinvented himself and ticked up versus Hicks, who was just kind of a continuation of, what he was doing. You just stretch it out a little bit more and you subdue this stuff a little bit more.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that's why the upside here is definitely more immense. He also started getting a lot more vert on the fastball too, which, you tick up and you're getting more vert. Like that's gonna tend to bode well for that heater. Like for whatever he found, he definitely was just able to let it rip. And that has helped him get a lot more swing and miss at the top as well. That's always going to bode well, right? When you have that fastball that's going to get swing and miss in the zone and a slider that's incredibly effective, those two pitches can allow him to turn lineups over. And then he's got the splitter that he can sprinkle in 12% of the time, 13% of the time. Like that's an arsenal that's going to work as a starter. And he'll sprinkle in a sinker. And I wonder that now that he is a starter, if he starts to throw that pitch more to get those ground balls and get that early contact, I'd imagine yes. And if he's doing that, then you can feel really good about this arsenal and how it plays.
For sure.
I think that because you have to look at it from this lens, right? Like you probably don't want to throw your slider more than 41, 42% of the time as a starter. And how do you cut into that number a little bit? By upping the fastball usage. He can up that fastball usage so easily by just throwing more sinkers, right? He threw a 39, four seamer 39% of the time, sinker 8%. Up that sinker usage at 12, 13%. You get some more ground balls,
Yeah.
maybe even more to lefties. You get more ground balls, you get more weak contact to keep the pitch count down, and then that four seamer still plays at the top of the zone. I think the arsenal makes a lot of sense, similar to the Clay Holmes conversation, where you can
Yeah.
see how the arsenal works as a starter. My only concern really is just going to be workload and how the arm holds up.
Yeah.
But I think it also gives them a great spot here where you have two guys who you want to see how it looks as a starter, but have the fallback as a reliever. And I think
Right.
that's why Ross Atkins has been hesitant to define Yariel Rodriguez's role
Hmm.
before the season starts. But Yariel Rodriguez, who they signed to, it was like a 4 year, 5 year, $32 million deal.
I think it was
So
5 for 30 or something. I'll pull it up right now.
um, he he made 21 starts, but they were short, and sometimes was almost more of an opener. Still trying to figure out his arsenal. Also, still trying to stay healthy, but has the potential to be a good back end arm. Could also be a good reliever. Like I wonder how those two kind of compare. You have more money invested into Hoffman now, and to me, that contract, like you mentioned, the numbers within it, those incentives essentially should almost make it like it really is. You mentioned for Hoffman, it was 3 years, 33.
Hmm.
It really is like 3 years, 35, 36, because they're essentially saying as long as you are healthy, you're going to get paid the extra money you wanted, right? For 60 innings, 70, 80 innings, 90 innings. Like 500,000 for each of those. Those are very low hanging fruit incentives that were created clearly, I think, to give them a little bit of protection if the arm goes in spring training, like they might be concerned that it is, but also gives him the chance to recoup the money that he wanted that probably has been a knockdown from the numbers that he had agreed upon with the Orioles and the Braves.
Right. I saw 3 for 40 was the agreed upon number with Baltimore, but that fell through. So that could get him back to that. I'm looking at Yariel right now. It was 5 for 32, but it was 4 years guaranteed, and then a $6 million player option. If he
Okay.
declines the player, it turns into a $10 million club. But it's interesting to see escalators for innings totals for Yariel as well. This coming year, he gets 100 grand if he gets to 130, another 100 if he gets to 140, and then that escalates through 150, 160, 170. Same deal in 26 and 27 and 28. But in 2028, he's got an innings escalator if he gets to 60 innings, 70 innings, or 80 innings. So, like, you have all of this as well, where it's like you have escalators as a reliever, you have escalators as a starting pitcher as well. And that can really up the value on a Yariel Rodriguez versus this. It feels like they paid him to be a reliever and they can escalate to him being a starting pitcher. I was going to ask you about the fit. And, like, of course, and I hope we've made this clear, we're having this Hoffman discussion with the umbrella of multiple failed physicals. This could be brutal, but we want to look at this from an on-field perspective and call this a good heady move by
Mm-hmm.
Toronto if we can. And I think it is if he doesn't, run into the issues that were flagged in his physical with Baltimore and Atlanta. Um,
Romano's gone. They're paying him a good amount of money, and
yeah,
they may use him heavily. And so like that's the side of it as well. Where like as you mentioned, like that bullpen's not great. He may go some multi-inning saves, and for him, I think that probably helps a lot to recoup that money. If he's healthy this year, they can always try it next year. Because remember, it's kind of backloaded too, right? It's 7-6 this year with the incentives that can easily bring it up to 10.
yeah,
But then 2026, it's 12.6, and 2027, it's 12.6. So, maybe they'll try something else later. Especially if they move on from a Gosman or a Bassett or whatever it may be.
right,
So it might be, hey, hold down the high leverage in our bullpen this year, and then we're going to be in a big transition phase, which we're going to
yeah,
get to, with just the conversation around the Blue Jays. But we're going to be in a transition phase, and we might have a lot of money cleared up, but we also are going to have a lot of spots cleared up, and you can compete for the rotation spot if you're healthy through this year and prove that the arm thing isn't an issue. So it seems like for now, Yariel is going to have that 5 spot.
yeah.
I'm going to see how it looks, and Hoffman gives them some much needed high leverage, just proven ability back there.
Yeah, Yariel or Bloss, like Jake Bloss, who came over in that Kikuchi deal at the deadline. I
I,
feel
I
like
like
that is
Bloss
a
a lot.
co-5 thing where you've got that filled out of Gosman, Barrios, Bassett, and Bowden Francis as 4, and then you figure it out with Yariel or Bloss as the 5, and Hoffman escalates. And I like, escalate. That's the word of the podcast right now. But um, what I want to look at Hoffman as is not Clay Holmes, where the Mets signed Clay Holmes to be a starter. I want to close my eyes and see Jeff Hoffman as 2019 Liam Hendricks in Oakland. Like that is the way that I am looking at Jeff Hoffman this year. 2019, Hendricks made 75 appearances. He threw 85 innings out of the bullpen. I think that's what you can ask for there. And Hendricks in that year was 1-8. He was an all-star. He was arguably the best reliever in baseball. I don't think Hoffman is there. Like, I think there are guys with way better stuff. But in terms of workload, that was a guy that Oakland was turning to, and that was a guy that the White Sox paid and turned to consistently to get a 6 out save. Like, that is
Yep.
the way that I think Hoffman is best utilized. And we'll see how Toronto wants to utilize him.
And I think the innings like threshold there, like you're not getting to 90 innings just by saving single inning
No,
games. Like
no.
that's I think his opportunity potentially to show that, hey, I can get stretched out a little bit, and then maybe they can evaluate that later on. But the arsenal does make sense for it. I
Yeah,
think 2 failed physicals obviously
yeah,
reimagined how they were going to go about it, and I like that for the Blue Jays too, because I think you could really argue that the high leverage arm was more needed, because I do think a combination of Yariel Rodriguez and Jake Bloss, one of those guys should be able to hold down that 5
for
spot
sure.
and be a solid 5 starter. And I think there's a real chance where both of them could be decent 5s next year, and now you've got a nice situation overall.
Yep, 100%. So that is the Hoffman conversation. I do want to get into the Blue Jay conversation as a whole, but before we do that, a quick break. The Toronto Blue Jays are in a weird spot, man. And let's walk through what could go down with Toronto. Their final payroll number in 2024 was the ninth highest in Major League Baseball. It was $218.4 million. They go into 2025 with a projected tax payroll of 229.2. So they have elevated their payroll. They're going for it. Is that the right decision? Probably not. I don't think so, but we'll treat it like they're going for it in 25. Transactions to this point. Via waivers, they've lost Hagen Danner, Nick Raposo, and Luis de los Santos. They added Michael Peterson. They non-tendered Jordan Romano and Dylan Tate. They took Angel Bastardo from Boston in the Rule 5 draft. Trade-wise, they acquired Andres Jimenez and reliever Nick Sandlin from Cleveland for Spencer Horwitz and Nick Mitchell. They agreed to minor league deals with Michael Stefanik, Kevin Gowdy, Eric Lauer back from the KBO, and Ali Sanchez. They signed Joshua Walker, a reliever, to a 1 year deal at the minimum. I think it's 760. Minimum is 800. They signed Jimmy Garcia. They brought him back 2 years, $15 million. And of course, they signed Jeff Hoffman, 3 years, $33 million, with escalators involved. The lineup looks older. It doesn't look as good with Varsho out right now, and Varsho had shoulder surgery. He may not be ready until the All-Star break, is what I was reading. And even
Sounds like
then, you're back from a shoulder injury. What's it going to look like?
yeah, which stinks because I think this is a year where you look at the outfield situation. He would have been as inconsistent as the bat has been, and even though he's kind of like staring uphill at league average slash line. It was a 99 WRC plus last year. He's just a proven commodity that's going to go out there and play elite defense and hit you 18 to 20 home runs. And
Yeah,
those don't grow on trees, right? And now you have a situation where you're going to need a young guy to take a leap. You're going to need Joey Loperfido to make some more contact and you just continue to develop, which I absolutely think he can do.
for
And I
sure.
think he will do. And I actually already saw some video of him working in the cages, and he was talking about some of the things that he's kind of just tried to shore up to increase his contact and handle the verti fastballs at the top. Like this guy's got crazy power. That's a guy that can make a huge leap for you, but you need that. You need a Will Wagner to potentially continue what he did in his impressive big league cameo last year. I mean, Ernie Clement was awesome, but he's got to
Yep.
do that again, right? Like, is Nathan Luke's going to duplicate his 800 OPS and 91 plate appearances? All of those things aren't going to happen, but some of them need to now, especially with Varsho out,
Yeah.
because you have an outfield situation right now, which is, a veteran George Springer, and then it's a couple, unproven guys. I wouldn't say young because Nathan Lukes is 30,
Yeah.
but a couple, unproven guys.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm looking at a Springer that has gotten older and clearly doesn't have the spring in his step that he did 3 years ago. What the hell does Bo Bichette's 2025 look like? Like, I
Can't be
have so many
worse.
questions like that where, it can't be worse. I'm with you, but is it Bo? Is it the Bo from 22 and 23 where we're saying this guy could be a top 30 player in all of Major League Baseball? Andres Jimenez, who are you with the bat now? We know you're a platinum glove level defender, but you got to hit to make this thing worth it, make that contract worth it. Alejandro Kirk, who are you, dude? Are you one of the bright young stars of the catching position in Major League Baseball, or are you a guy that is a bottom half starting catcher in Major League Baseball? I have questions there. I have no questions about this rotation because they are going to keep it as is. And we talked about that with Yariel and Bloss being the co-5. Gosman, Barrios, Bowden Francis, and Bassett as the front four. I'm cool with it. This bullpen is really not good. Even with Hoffman as a closer, I'm looking at Chad Green and Jimmy Garcia. I think it's, fine, but it's not top level. There's a whole bunch of slightly above mediocre on this roster. And that worries me because there's no clear cut deficiency when you look at the three factors of a team, right? Starting rotation, bullpen, and lineup. There's none that I look at and say, this is really bad. But there's none that I look at and say, this is definitively top 10 in Major League
Yeah.
Baseball.
And there's just, yeah, I think there's a lot of that, like, let's wait and see what he can do this year type of player situation, which how many guys can you give an opportunity to in that spot? Where
Right.
again, I mentioned Loperfido, but I also still think Addison Barger can be a really
Hmm.
solid big league bat. Where do his ABs come in here? Uh, Davis Schneider had a tough year, but Davis Schneider, we saw what he did, in his first big league stint, and then just trying to find it and continue it last
Yeah.
year. There was just some tough stretches for him, and ultimately that suppressed the numbers. But that's a guy that you still need to see what you got and give him ABs. Jonathan Clase, you just acquired him. He's toolsy. He's put up great numbers in the minor leagues. You got to see what you got with him. Uh, Arelvis
Arelvis
Martinez,
Martinez. I was going to
long
say
been one of your
Arelvis.
top prospects, puts up elite EVs. I'm not as high on him, but like you got to see what you have with him. And that's why I don't really understand the Blue Jays situation because now I do applaud them not going into a full teardown or anything like that. And I do like to see teams continue to try to maintain being competitive.
Right.
But how do you answer these questions if these players are kind of frozen out of being able to try to prove that?
Right.
Like Barger's going to put up video game numbers in AAA, or Elvis is probably going to do the same. When do you get the big league clarity on these guys? Are you just going to wait another year? Maybe they do, and maybe that's what they do. I would have probably just thought it would make more sense to try to package those guys, trade those guys. Then, if you're not going to go on the young side, which again I get it, it's a corporate organization as well. Good. Don't rebuild then. Stay competitive.
Yeah.
Trade some of those guys. Like that's the weird, confusing part for me.
You know, I think the middle of the seesaw for me that would have decided between, hey, let's sell off some assets and lean into the young thing versus, hey, let's sell off the young guys and attack this veteran thing. The middle of the seesaw for me was Tiedemann. If Ricky Tiedemann did look like one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball and the best lefty pitching prospect in baseball, I think they could look at this and say, hey, we've got a bright future. We have a window opening again in about 2 years. Let's go look for control in the upper minors and young pre-R big leaguers. And let's get ready to blossom when Tiedemann is blossoming and when
Yeah.
Arelvis is blossoming and Barger is. But Tiedemann is nowhere to be found right now. And Tiedemann has been so unavailable. And now he's going to miss the entirety of 25 with an elbow issue. Like, it's just brutal, man.
Their other
And I,
first round lefty, Brandon
yeah,
Barrera, he's out. He's barely been available. Trey Savage fell to them because of concerns with the medical, so they
yeah.
grab him. Hopefully that looks like a steal, but that's going to be an interesting conversation there. Their other top pitching prospect, Adam Macko, has a history of some arm concern as
Yeah.
well. So like yeah, there's not a lot of clarity on what these guys are going to do. And then where Elvis, I think, is one of the more polarizing prospects in
Right.
baseball.
And it doesn't help that he just missed 80 games with the drug suspension.
No, that doesn't help at all. It is huge that they were able to get a Jake Bloss. Like this
Huge,
organization desperately needed a Jake Bloss. And then to add a Loperfido to the fold, like they did great on that trade.
for sure.
But your consolidating can't just be Spencer Horwitz for Andres Jimenez when Horwitz is maybe the one guy of all the young, quote unquote, unproven bats. I think I'm most confident at least knowing what you're getting with a Spencer Horwitz.
Yeah.
Like that guy's going to hit. I don't think there's any question about that
And
anymore.
he's going to walk and he's going to play an okay second or a good first. Like you knew exactly what you were getting. I'm with you.
And now you're kind of playing the what do we got here game. And I understand that that was how you're going to be able to get Jimenez. I'm okay with that because at least you're getting a guaranteed above average regular.
Yeah.
But I would like them to do at this point. You might as well just go out and try to get some more impact here and just try to hope that you hit a parlay with your young guys and make it work.
I think we are signing guys in hopes of extending Ross Atkins. You know what I mean? Like I think this is we have to operate like this is a last ditch effort to put together a
I,
contending team with this group.
I love that you mentioned that. That's probably a big reason why we've seen the team in this purgatory,
Yeah.
right? Because Ross Atkins is trying to keep a job.
Yeah.
And, I thought he wasn't going to make it through last year.
Yeah.
I don't think one trade saves your job, but I do think that Kikuchi trade probably helped
Hmm.
helped his case. But yeah, I mean they've got to show something. I don't think they need to necessarily and probably in his mind, hey, we don't need to win the division. But if somehow this team can win 87, 88 games,
Yeah.
which is very lofty, but if they could somehow do that, Atkins probably buys himself another year, right? So that's where they're at. But I think it's kind of a perfect segue if it does. And I think the Blue Jays are assuming that it's not going to work out.
Right.
I'd imagine at the top. Okay, well then Vladdy and Guerrero, or Vladdy Guerrero and Bo
Yeah,
Bichette are going to be Vladdy and Guerrero. Vladdy and Bo Bichette are going to be free agents. Gossman and Barrios and Bassett aren't too far behind that.
free up
It'll
a
be
ton of
this
money.
new era, and we'll bring somebody else in to lead that new era.
Yeah.
So this is, I feel like it's last gasp for Ross Atkins, and odds are it's not going to go great, but you might as well give it a shot. And I think that's what he's going to try to do, especially since they clearly have budget for him.
And I think he's got 4 months, man. Like I do think if they are lacking a direction by the deadline, you got to recoup some value on Vladdy because Vladdy's not coming back if it's not going well in 2025. So you trade Bichette, you trade Vladdy, you trade Gosman. They could be the team with the fire sale at the deadline, and I think we're going to understand the direction. But we want to, for the sake of the exercise, put together a team that is going to be near the top of the American League East and in the wild card conversation at the deadline, so they're not moving, they're buying. I want to ask you, like, as currently constructed, can this group be part of a team that wins 88 games? The
No.
rotation, yes or no?
Oh, the rotation part.
Yes. I think yes.
With a really good offense, with a good offense, yeah, I think it's just it depends on, I hate to give you just a long-winded answer to this, but like what Kevin Gausman are you getting
Right.
this year? And he did start last year hurt. Let's hope that he had a full off season to get himself right,
Yeah.
and he still was effective. Barrios, you know what you're getting. Bowden Francis, can he duplicate that? And then, what do you get from the Yariel Rodriguez's and Jake Blosses of the world? Bassett, you know what you're getting. I
Yeah.
think I could talk myself into it. I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. They have the talent to do it. And
Right.
they at least have depth now with a Bloss. If there was no Bloss, I'd be like, oh gosh, one of those guys goes down, and they've all kind of been doing that lately, or I have some concern there. I'd be a little bit more worried, but at
Right.
least they have one really solid alternate ready to go too.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think if it all goes according to plan, and that's what we're banking on, if it all goes according to plan, this rotation can be part of a team that wins 88 games. Now, as currently constructed, can this lineup be part of a team that wins 88 games? I don't think the answer is yes. So
No.
then we follow up. How do you build it to a place where it can be part of a team that wins 88 games?
And also in the rotation front, for what it's worth, they would get potentially Manoa back in August. I think they're saying
Yeah.
July range. So
Yeah.
he's a body. Um, what is this? I mean, internally, I think you have to operate. If you're the Blue Jays, you have to operate under the assumption that Bo Bichette is going to be Bo Bichette next year. You
Yeah.
just have to,
Have to.
otherwise, there's just no way you're going to make that all back. So if Bo Bichette's even close, let's say he's 70% of Bo Bichette,
Yeah.
that means he's still an above average big league hitter, give you a 115 WRC plus. The idea of having a Bichette and Guerrero back to back is exciting for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But then who do you trust outside of that?
Nobody, which is why I want to go get Anthony Santander. I
You
think
have to.
this is the fit.
You have to. And the thing is like it could blow up on them a little bit. I think there's a reason why Santander is still available.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from the way that I think the Blue Jays are looking at like the books as like business oriented as just about any other team other than the Braves. Right? I think that's just like it's what's coming off. What are we going to add on to it? How are the spreadsheets going to look? You have Chris Bassett's 22 coming off in 2025.
Yeah.
You have Kevin Gossman's 23 million coming off after 2026. Sorry, after 2025, I should say, with Bassett. And then I think a few other guys like Chad Green's only on a 1 year deal for 10.5 million. Like a lot of money will come off the books. If you don't retain Vladdy, 28.5 off the books. If you don't retain Bichette, which it seems like they won't, 17 off the books. That all comes out to, in terms of guaranteed commitments for this year, it's 192. But
Mm-hmm.
then for 2026, it's only 100 million. And for 2027, it's only 68 million. So I assume that the Blue Jays are looking at that and saying, we can probably make an offer to Santander that's closer to what he wants in total value, and we just backload it a little bit more, assuming that they don't want to blow past the CBT this year. But they could definitely get closer to the number I think that Santander wants than just about any other team. It's a roll of the dice, but if I'm Ross Atkins, I'm probably doing it because I'm saying if ownership is saying I can spend 80 mil, which there's no reason to believe that they aren't,
Yeah.
given the fact that they've been in on every single player ever. Um, I'm giving it a shot and hoping he hits 40 again, and just just
Yeah.
just praying that that helps elevate us.
Do you think that he is willing? I saw the reports that what Santander and Flaherty were both kind of eyeballing the high AAV low year deal. Like, I understand 4 for 80 is what Santander wants, but could he get 2 for 50 and be happy, 2 for 55 and be happy? I think that's the best way to go if I'm Toronto, because say this year blows up in their face. Okay, we only have one more year at 27 or $28 million of Santander, and then we can really tear down the payroll.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I guess they would lose, quote unquote, lose money this year, presumably, if they blow past the CBT, but then they would look at a rebuild and like, don't get it twisted. If you're an organization that has good baseline support, when they're rebuilding, they still do quite well financially because you're
Yeah,
cutting that payroll by 130 plus $1 million. So like
right.
even if you know the turnstiles aren't turning as much. Like the TV money's still there for, which it depends who. I don't know what the Blue Jays RSN situation is as much, but
I mean,
I
they've
don't
got a
see
whole
them as
country watching. Like, they run laps
they don't
around
seem to
any
be
team
in
in the states.
they don't seem to be in much financial distress
Yeah,
considering what they've been trying to do. They're like the new Giants, just trying to sign
right.
free agents left and right. So, yeah, I think it would still work for them too if they're just comfortable with the idea that, hey, we might lose money this year or like not make as much as we normally like to, but if it's a short term deal, we can trade him. He can walk. We can get out of it if he can't match his production. And, in 2026, we have a ton of money to do whatever the hell we want. And we can, that they'll get their guy when they want to
Right.
at that point.
Right. So I do think that there's a world where they can convince Santander, hey, take a 1+1 with us or something, and say you ball out. You can hit the open market again, and you can prove that 24 wasn't a fluke. But if they find the right price point at a 1+1, I think this would be perfect. This would be a perfect fit for Santander. It would be perfect for the Blue Jays.
Probably too good for a 1+1. Would it be like the Cody Bellinger second deal, like the 2+1 with like
Was that a 2+1 or was that a 1+1?
so
I
or
thought it was
oh the one
compounding.
plus one, the one being the player option, not a
Yeah,
team
yeah, yeah.
option. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I think
So
he would say yes to a player option where if he balls out, he can hit the open market again, but he's got that bedrock of $28 million that he can land back on
I think it
if
was
he
kind of one
loses.
plus one plus two, right? Because it was like player option, player option.
Yeah,
So he had
you
two
can
shots at it.
absolutely do that.
Yeah, so it'd be like a 1+2 because the guy hit 40 bombs. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna get a 1+2 at least.
He
So
gets he gets liberty to make his decision after the 25
twice.
season. I don't think
Yeah,
this is a guy that agrees to a club option. I don't think there's a world where there's a club option in this
no.
contract.
And I
It's
think
either
only one player option doesn't protect him enough in guaranteed earnings. So I think
right.
replicating that 1+1+1 again, essentially.
Yeah, and I think he would say yes to that at this point because the market is not materialized for him in the way that I'm sure he and his agent were hoping for.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's just, and I'm assuming he's confident in himself, and
Yeah,
not the concern about the OBP that we were talking about. And like, if he
right.
doesn't hit 40, does the OPS eclipse 800? I doubt he's looking at all that stuff. So, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about it. I'm like, there's no team that needs Santander as much, I think, as the Blue Jays, given
Right.
where they see themselves to currently be at.
Because he can DH, and that turns Will Wagner back into a utility type guy. They have no DH really right now. You look at roster resource, and Wagner is slated as the opening day DH, which is not great. You could also put him in a corner. You could put him in left, and Loperfido could play center, and Nathan Lucas moves to a DH or a bench role, which would probably be better for a 30-year-old that has yet to really get his footing
Yeah,
in Major League Baseball. And then
but
Clase
you
can
also have
figure
to
it out in
assume that
Triple.
Springer's going to miss time, right? Like
Yeah,
I know he was healthy last year for the most part, and that was nice to see. And the last 2 years he's been on the field, but I mean, we've seen this guy historically be banged up, and I think you got to factor in at 35 years old, it's probably a guy that you want to run through the DH spot a little bit more,
right.
guy that you're probably going to give some more scheduled days off to. Like he had he's had okay years the last 2 years because he was available and he was able to accumulate. And I think that's what you got to just hope to squeeze out at this point. So
Right.
if he can maintain league average production and keep him healthy, that's probably the best case scenario with the Blue Jays being tied up contractually to him.
Hmm.
So I think that's the great kind of piece to spell Springer as well. So I think it's a no brainer. They got to go that route.
So we signed Santander 1+1+1, whatever value he wants, because the Blue Jays can do it. What else are you doing to this lineup? Like I thought nothing else because, say Ernie Clement doesn't work at third base, chances are Orelvis got off to a really good start or Barger got off to a really good start in Buffalo, and you can make that work. And Barger can plug in the corner outfield at this point. Orelvis can plug into the DH spot at this point. Like there's enough irons in the fire here where I feel like you can be okay with having Santander in the fold in an everyday role and then having your backup plan be prospects.
Yeah, as much as I want to like try to shoehorn another bat in there, it's like
Where's the
where?
space? I don't think there's
Where?
space. Like a third baseman, there's not a single third baseman on the free agent market that I feel good about, and they don't have the assets to be active on the trade market.
And it just wouldn't make sense, right? You're going to trade, a couple guys that could end up playing regularly for you in 26 or in the
For
back half of this year.
right for
If
Alec Boehm, like, are we
Yeah,
sure?
what's that going to do for you? I'm still, yeah, I will pound the pavement. I am still, or pound the table. I always mix those up. I don't even know what's the proper saying on that.
I think it's pound the table. I'll
Pound
look
the
up what
table.
pound the pavement actually means.
Yeah, I think that would be like a bad thing, right? Um, but I I do believe that Addison Barger can be a good big leaguer, whether it be in corner outfield or playing some more third base. With where Elvis already there, you have multiple of your top prospects in AAA waiting in the wings to grab third base, and you have Leo Jimenez who can play utility all over. I just don't see why you would move 5+ years of those guys
No,
to have him at another position. The only other player I could think of was like a Jerkson Profar, but if you sign Santander, it's kind of redundant. I think
I think so.
if you were not able to get Santander, I think Profar makes sense, and that could be a deal that
Yeah,
fits well for them, given switch hitter, give him a right-handed bat there. Another guy that not the best defender in the world, but you just stick him in a corner and you can also run through the DH spot and
yeah.
doesn't really block anybody. So that's another option I think is a plan B as well.
So funny. Like Santander and Profar, one of them is going to be a Blue Jay and the other is going to be an A, and there's no other situation where you can convince me that these guys go. Like I think the first one's going to sign with Toronto, and then 48 hours later, the second one signs with Oakland.
Could see that. I could absolutely see that. And like they've been tied to Pete Alonso. I just don't think it makes sense. Though they could do a similar, more lucrative 1+1+1 since Alonso seems to not be thrilled with how his market has materialized
But like,
either.
just go to the Mets on the 1+1+1. Like
That's
I
the
don't
thing.
know.
They'll give it to you.
There
So
are so many elements there.
I agree on that. So and I'm trying to think of like a short term time buyer at third base if you wanted to try it, and there's just really not one out
There's
there.
not one. Like you gonna do it with Yohan Moncada? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
By the way, pound the table, a person passionately making their point or expressing their opinion in a forceful manner. Pound the pavement, search diligently for something, or walk the streets in an effort to accomplish something. So if you're looking like if you're on the job hunt, you're pounding the pavement. If you're passionate about something, you're pounding the table.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you,
That,
Google.
that's that's my uh that's my special segment here.
Easy.
That's my last word.
Perfect. What reliever do you want to sign? Because I look at this bullpen, and again, I pose the question, is this unit part of a team that can win 88 games? And my answer to the bullpen is no, even with Hoffman in the fold.
It's better for sure
It's better,
than I
but
think.
I don't think it can be part of it.
No, Bastardo, even the Rule 5 pick, is a guy that's recovering from TJ. So like he's not even gonna be able to help them.
Right.
Um, Sandlin was rough at the end of last year. Hopefully, him being healthy, he can help them out. Clearly, they believe in him. Like that was part of the return for them. I loved adding Jimmy back, and again, Green was solid, and Hoffman now is a great get for them. But yeah, I think this is where you probably go a little higher profile for somebody. I'm not saying like the best arm on the market. Like I
No,
don't think a Tanner Scott makes sense, and I don't think a Tanner Scott's going to want to go somewhere where he could potentially be traded again. But I do think you could shoot a little higher here because I do think with the way the reliever market's going to settle in, it might play into the Blue Jays' hand a little bit for these like tier 2 relievers.
which is why I like a Leclerc here. I think Jose Leclerc could make some sense because Leclerc is going to command some money because he was a closer for a team that won the World Series in 2023, and he's been a leverage arm for a team with promise over the last few years. And was it underwhelming last year? Yeah, it was. Was it volatile and a little dangerous in 23? Yeah, it was. But at the end of the day, he has tons of experience and leverage, and he was being, relied upon in huge moments in the postseason and the regular season as well. So, if this guy wants a 2-year, $12 million deal, I think a team like Toronto can give it to him. So that's where my eyes went initially.
It's probably going to be a guy that's not hell bent on getting the ninth too, right?
Because
Because
Right now we're talking about Hoffman getting the ninth.
yeah, Estevez that probably rules him out.
Yeah.
I think that's a guy that's probably the last clear cut remaining closer,
Hmm.
like true closer outside of Tanner Scott. I think Kirby Yates is interesting as
Yeah.
well. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's hell bent on the ninth. Um,
I don't think so.
Yates is higher impact,
Yeah.
older. What do you feel like this bullpen needs, like in terms of a type? Like Hoffman brings you Ks, they needed that. Jimmy Garcia brings you Ks. I think you could argue that it still needs more whiff though.
I think so because I look at the next tier of this bullpen and I see Chad Green and Eric Swanson and Little Pop and Nance, and I just don't see crazy, crazy stuff here. Like I would
Chad
love
Green
to
struck out
add, yeah,
less than 8 per 9,
yeah, like I would love to add punch outs. I would love to add stuff.
and that's where Leclerc, like, even though he had a 4.32, 89 punchies and 66 and 2/3,
Yeah,
and the ship's kind of sailed on him closing. He had one save last year. He had four the year before that. Like,
right.
I think that might be the fit that makes
And
the most sense. And he
and
gets an
it,
opportunity here where like he could very well. I mean, he's the setup guy,
right.
and he's gonna probably pick up more saves next year just by the way things work out
Yeah.
than he probably would anywhere else, and than he did in the last couple of years. Like he's if he signs with the Blue Jays, he's still gonna close out a handful of games. I mean, Chad Green had like 10 plus saves last year, which
Right.
is pretty funny, but like or 17 saves. But like that is another guy that I think if you're the Blue Jays, you're comfortable giving Hoffman the ninth, but he's not a guy that's like thrown a ton in the ninth. So just to have another iron in the fire with
Yeah.
some experience in that last inning, I think is great. I think that is a good fit.
Do you think we need anything else? I view good bullpens as a clear ninth inning option, and they have that with Hoffman, and then a whole bunch of eighth/ninth inning options. And I see that. Like I see three of them in Green, in Jimmy, and as we add Jose Leclerc.
I would like a lefty.
Okay.
Brooks Raley's been drawing some interest.
Sure.
Could be a cheaper because I don't think they're going to spend another big like that would push them pretty high up here.
Yeah.
But maybe Andrew Chafin.
You want Yarborough?
Oh gosh, I would say Chafin, another big strikeout guy though. Like with how many like command guys they have in this bullpen, like relatively speaking, pretty low walk rates for
Yeah.
relievers. I would be comfortable taking a shot on like a volatile like, walk guy who like teams are maybe a little bit afraid of because they walk more than you'd like to see, but are pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of a lefty that fits that bill, but
Is there one out
I
there on the
think
free
I think
agent market?
a lefty would be helpful in this bullpen just because right now it's only Brandon Lettle.
Yeah. I mean, Tim Hill doesn't K anybody.
No.
Does that guy exist? Amir Garrett? Gross.
Oh gosh, I know I said volatile, but I didn't mean that volatile. I don't
Like
think.
Genesis Cabrera would be awesome to bring back, but he signed a minor league deal with the Mets.
um, Drew Smiley.
I mean, that's not stuff.
That's
It's
not stuff at all. I think Chafin's probably worth a shot. What's Andrew Chafin getting on the open market?
I don't know, 1 year for 7.
Yeah, go get Chafin.
Okay.
They, I'd say you're going to try to separate this team. You got to try to really bolster up this bullpen.
So we signed Santander to a 1+1+1, Leclerc to a 2, and Chafin to a 1.
Yeah,
Okay. I feel like that is an objectively better team.
gives them a fighter's chance. And
Yeah.
we can't trade anybody because it just doesn't make sense.
No. So that's the improvement that we made to this team. Backup catcher, like I don't know, try something. Tyler Heineman is that your guy? I know he's a decent clubhouse presence, but like,
Um, Yeah, you can do whatever you want there. I
What a,
think
what a fall from grace where they had a really good Jansen and Gabby Moreno with Kirk, and now it's Tyler Heineman and no other option.
and they had four War Kirk. I will say it's huge for them that Kirk was able to develop as much as he has defensively.
Yeah.
Like he's turned into a pretty nice defender. But man, he's got to hit better. Yeah, going from dream scenario to where they're at now, it's interesting. But yeah, just take a flyer on a backup. Also love the Michael Stefanik pickup for them this
Oh
year
yeah.
as a non-roster invitee. I hope he gets some run. But yeah, I mean, you just throw a catcher back there, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Heineman's
So,
fine.
team that we're looking at right now, catching tandem of Kirk and Heineman, Vladdy at first, Andres Jimenez at second, Bichette at short, Ernie Clement at third. You've got a Relvis there when he's ready. Leo Jimenez and Davis Schneider are the middle infield backup. Jimenez at short, Davis at second. You probably have Loper Fito in left, Nathan Lucas and Jonathan Classe in center, Springer in right, the DH Anthony Santander with Will Wagner functioning as a utility guy. The rotation, Gosman, Barrios, Bowden Francis, Bassett, Yariel Rodriguez, and Bloss as the six. And then the bullpen would be Hoffman, Chad Green, Jimmy Garcia, Jose Leclerc, Andrew Chafin, Eric Swanson, Nick Sandlin. That team can win 87, 88 games if it all goes right.
If everything goes right, you have a puncher's chance. And I think that's all that they can really ask for at this point. I think that's all that Ross Atkins can really ask for. And if you are playing better though, and you can kind of compete a little bit, that's where you can maybe consolidate too and start to move some of those pieces if you want to try to go in, all in or whatever. But um, I think it's going to end up being a clarity year for them,
Yeah.
and that's probably what they'll do. But the good news is if on those deals, if Santander is performing, you could probably still end up moving that deal too, because there's plenty of teams that were probably in on him in free agency, wanted to see him follow it up. If
Right.
he follows it up with a great first half, but your team's not doing well, you can move that +1/+1 and end up getting a prospect haul there. Or he could be struggling and your team's really bad and you're in a tough spot, but at least you're only on the hook for another year. And then hopefully he plays his way out of that. He's not going to want to be on a rebuilding team. And then another year, worst case scenario after that. So I think it's worth a shot for them.
Yep. Nats are going to be quick, but before we get to the Nats, one more quick break. The Nats are quick because they've already done everything that we've asked them to do. The Washington Nationals are kind of putting their money where their mouth is right now, and they're doing it in pretty unique ways. Their final payroll number in 2024 was $140.5 million. Their estimation in 25 in terms of tax payroll is 124.9, well clear at 241. Transactions so far, they lost Thad Ward on waivers to Baltimore. Pour one out for Thaddeus Ward, the Rule 5 pick. But they took Evan Reifert from Tampa in the Rule 5,
Upgrade.
who could be very good in that bullpen. They declined their mutual option on Joey Gallo. They non tender Kyle Finnegan and Tanner Rainey. They get out of the Patrick Corbin contract. They also lost Trevor Williams to free agency. More on him in a moment. Jacob
Wait.
Barnes and Joey Meneses to free agency, but then they bring Trevor Williams back. 2 years, $14 million. Mike Soroka, they signed to one for $9 million. Josh Bell to one for $6 million. Jorge Lopez, who we love as a bounce back candidate in the bullpen, to one for $3 million. And Ahmed Rosario in a utility role, one for $2 million. In the big trade, they acquire Nathaniel Lowe from Texas for reliever Robert Garcia. This has been one of the more encouraging off seasons that we've had in Major League Baseball, I think.
You can see them seeing the vision as well, right? Obviously, like you could see them seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and saying, "All right, we're going to start acting like a team that's going to be on the precipice of competing." And I love it. I absolutely love it. And you have to hope that there's not as much growing pain with a Dylan Cruz and a James Wood. I don't think there's going to be as much with the latter. I do think Dylan Cruz is going to battle through it and come out with a solid season. But is he going to rake? I don't know. I don't think they need him to still be a really solid team. Like Dylan Cruz could be at the bottom of your lineup, wreaking havoc on the base paths, playing elite right field, and getting better and better offensively as the year progresses. And you look at this team and you're like, I tell me where like stop me if you think a guy will have a below average offensive season. If we're just looking at it in the eyes of WRC plus,
Yeah.
CJ Abrams, James Wood, Nathaniel Lowe, Luis Garcia, Josh Bell.
Let's call it 102.
That's above average. Dylan Cruz, did I say him?
No, not Cruz yet, but I do think that Cruz can give you a 105 and play good defense.
He can. I think that's one where it's like, okay, but even if he's shy, he's still going to give you above average value
Yeah.
um, as he progresses. And then I think the first answer would then be Jose Tena slash Keibert Ruiz slash Jacob Young.
Yeah.
Jacob Young, you can omit because he's giving you value everywhere else. Jose Tena wouldn't shock me if he was a decent bat, but you also have Ahmed Rosario, who's probably actually going to be spelling at the very least the left-handed at bats there, but he might end up just taking the starter role there, and Tana may be the utility guy. I there's good solid offense from top to bottom in that lineup. The biggest hole really is the guy that you gave the pre-arb extension to, I think, in Keibert Ruiz.
Yeah.
I think that might be the biggest hole offensively, and at least he's a catcher
Yeah, well, and you're right about Jacob Young because if there were no defensive value, Jacob Young would be the big hole defensively. But
or
this
offensively.
guy,
Yeah,
or offensively, yeah, but he's very good defensively. Shit, like he's moving Dylan Cruz to a corner outfield spot.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really hard to do, but you do that
Mhm.
if you have a gold glove caliber center fielder, and that's what Jacob Young is. And whenever that guy gets on first base, he has a chance to be on second base 2 pitches later. And
Yeah.
that's important to have. And I think that that is a great element of your 9 hole. I'm with you. And for the Washington Nationals, if we're looking at this team at the end of the year and they only have 3 guys, 3 spots in their lineup with a WRC plus under 100, that's a huge win of a season for Washington. And that is a team that is trending up. Rotation is fascinating to me, man. Gore is one of my. Does he still count as a breakout pick? I think he does.
He could kind of as a breakout pick. He had a 3.9 last year.
Yeah, like my true. I was thinking about like my breakout picks. Who are my guys for this year? I would love for Gore to be in that conversation, but Gavin Williams, who I know that we've talked about throughout the course of the offseason, like that's a breakout pick for me.
I,
Ryan
I
Papio
picked him
is a.
in the mailbag as a
Did you?
bounce back guy. I
Yeah.
agree.
So like Gavin Williams is that guy. Ryan Papio is that guy for me as well. I think he found the version of him that's going to work in the major league level and be very good. And Gore falls into that for me as well because you see it on a start by start basis. You turn on a Mackenzie Gore start and you know that he has front line upside. For some reason, he just fights himself over the
Yeah,
course of some starts. And if he
yeah.
stops fighting himself, and if he has supreme confidence, which I think he's deserved the right to have, this guy could absolutely be a one for a team. And I think Gore makes that step in 2025.
He's not even 26 yet,
I know.
and lefty pitchers are more frequently than any other type of I think pitcher archetype are the lefty starters are the ones that will have this clicking moment sometimes 4 years in, 5 years in, 6 years in, and makes all the difference in the world. So they could definitely use that because I think they lack that impact at the top,
Hmm.
but that is such a nice like situation to be in when we're talking about the Nationals, where like our nitpick is they don't have that front line punch. I thought the problem would have been like, how do they fill out 5 arms here? And
Yeah.
that's not really a problem anymore.
They might have six. They might have too many.
Yeah, which is great. And I do ultimately think I think DJ Hirsch showed some great things. I
Hmm.
do ultimately think he may be best off in the bullpen. He could 100% disprove that by just doing what he did last year again, which
Right.
again, his numbers were great. Soroka could be a guy that ends up being better off in the bullpen, but they're going to try him too. That's what you do at the final stage here of your rebuild. See
Yeah.
what you got there. Have the insurance policy with Trevor Williams, who's going to get you innings and throw well, and he did before he got hurt last year. Mitchell Parker, same story. Jake Irvin, same story. Those guys are going to throw to a
Yeah.
low fours, eat innings, and go out there and just not make you auto lose like it would have been if with some of the arms that I thought they might be rolling out there. So
Right.
you can look at that rotation and say, is it going to be top 15 in the league?
No.
No. But is it going to be bottom five? No. And so that's great. Like I think is as low of a bar as that seems like the floor is actually kind of solid, which is
Yeah.
shocking to
It's
say about a Nationals rotation already.
and
And
I
and I think it's going to get better as they continue to address it because I think they're going to get clarity this year. It's a team
mhm.
that's very clearly dedicated to the clarity side of things with all these arms. And then they'll act, I think this offseason on what they need to do pitching wise.
And there's a guy that we have not mentioned yet in the starting pitching fold that we're going to get a lot of clarity on in 2025. Is Cade Cavalli your future closer, or is he a starting pitcher for you? And I do think that the fallback is him being your future closer if he looks anything like he did pre Tommy John surgery. His stuff is so loud. I
Yep.
think Gore is the X factor currently on the roster, but the guy that isn't on the big league roster right now that'll probably start in Rochester just because he needs to build up is Cavalli. And I think
Yeah.
Cavalli's direction is going to help you figure out what your pitching staff as a whole looks like in 26 and beyond.
I love the idea of just putting him in a reliever role. Try to preserve him. His stuff is elite. It's some of the
Why
best stuff
can't
in
he
the
be
minor
Mason
leagues.
Miller? Yeah.
And now you got a guy that's going to really help bolster the bullpen with control. Um, yeah, I think that's the way to go about it. You just really hope he can stay healthy. Similar story with Cole Henry, who has great stuff too. If he can stay
Mm-hmm.
healthy, it's another decent reliever for them. And then Josiah Gray, like he got the brace. You hope he back at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But that's another arm that like we've seen him be a solid mid rotation arm. I don't know what it is anymore. We'll see what he looks like when he comes back. But that is still an arm with some talent that you'll get
Yeah.
some clarity on.
We've also seen him be brutal, and we'll figure out which version of Josiah Gray we get consistently. And if we don't get anything consistently, then that's a guy you slap in the five spot, and sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's brutal. But,
Yep.
you'll see. As it stands right now, though, this bullpen, if this team wants to be good in 2025, needs a lot of work. Like
Yeah.
Jorge Lopez is the closer as it stands right now, and then you've got Derek Law, Jose Ferrer, Salazar Lasorsa, Reifer, Jackson Rutledge. Is he a long man for them? Zach Brisky is on the 40 man. Like, it's really not good. I think those are the only moves left. I did think about the puzzle when it came to third base because Andres Chaparro is a guy that they got for Dylan Floro. I do think Tana or Rosario will grab that third base job and the other will be a utility guy. Would you prefer Chaparro at the big league level or would you prefer a 1 year, $1 million deal for a Moncada or a Luis Urias? Anything?
Hmm. It's a good question. I love the Chaparro story,
Yeah.
but if he's not absolutely destroying baseballs, there's not a lot of value there. And you kind of have Juan Yepes just hanging out,
Right.
right? Right. So I'd probably rather get a guy that could more truly play that position if I was going to go about it that way. But I'm also looking at the roster situation, and after getting Rosario, you're probably fine with the Rosario Tana situation there, right? And then
Platoon and then
and one
is
of the other ones on the bench, and you know, I mean, Alex Call was pretty solid last year in limited
and
sample
Stone
size.
Garrett's healthy. Stone Garrett's back, so
Don't go,
Garrett could
yeah,
be a corner
I think
outfielder.
you're okay with that bench situation.
Okay. Yeah, and Riley Adams, I do actually like as a backup catcher. I think he can figure it
Yeah,
out at the big league level.
yeah. So I like where they're at on the bench.
Okay, so lineup as is. Bullpen. What kind of guys were you looking at?
Honestly, this is a bullpen that I think needs a vet.
Yeah, so all right, I'm glad that we're on the same side. I want I want two guys. I want one of Kenley Jansen or Craig Kimbrell.
You think Kenley would do it?
What's his other option?
I don't know, but there's I don't know how much validity there was to like the conversation about him, just not being the most invested at points too. And I know some of his teammates actually came out and like defended and said he, think it was a little harsh, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, if Kenley wants to, and I feel like for Kenley, a big part of this is just accumulating some numbers here and just seeing how long he can go as a closer.
Yeah.
I don't think this guy's, I think he would rather close. I don't want to speak for him. I don't know him obviously, but I'd imagine he'd want to close before he's a seventh inning guy for a more competitive team. And like,
Right.
I think the Nationals could sit down with him and pitch him on why this team can maybe sneaky make some noise and point towards the other moves that they've made this offseason to try to be competitive.
Yeah.
And maybe they can pull that off. But remember, there's a guy that's played almost his entire career with the Dodgers, then 1 year with the Braves, and then Boston. So he's not really. He strikes me as a big market guy
Yeah.
that may not be the most interested in doing those types of things, but how many other teams are going to give him the opportunity is what I'm wondering now too. And I don't know if a ton of teams are going to be lining up to give him save opportunities.
I don't think so. And I do think that the conversation is pretty darn similar with Kimbrel, with the difference being that Kimbrel doesn't seem hesitant to join a smaller market.
No, no, not at all. And
Like
it
I think
could
Kimbrel begs for the ninth.
he has almost no chance of getting it. He definitely has no chance of getting it like anywhere else, right? I mean, so that is an opportunity for him to, and they won't even
And
guarantee it to him. I think it was just like you can earn the ninth.
well, and it's like remember, this is the same team that employed Jonathan Papelbon when he was on the other side of his prime. Like it does feel like they kind of hunt that big name that is looking for that last chance at closing games.
Yeah, and then he scrapped Bryce Harper.
Yeah, hopefully Kimbrel doesn't get into a fight with Wood or Cruz or anything.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. But you know what I would love? I would love you sign them both, right?
And they
Craig
fight to
Kimbrell
the
is at
death.
4. So Craig Kimbrell is at 440 saves in his career, and Kenley Jansen is at 447. There's only one guy who can pick up the save. You two will compete, and whoever is throwing better gets the ninth inning. And then whoever blows it, you go back to the eighth inning. That guy closes them out until he blows it, and then it's like king of the court. But you assign the save situations because I genuinely do think there's a level to these guys that they just want to see how many saves they can accumulate at
I
this stage
love
of their
that.
career.
What I would love to see, you know how like sometimes you've got what week one, week two, if Michigan is playing an FCS team, they'll run out, one quarterback. They did that with McCarthy and McNamara, right? It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
McCarthy for one drive, McNamara for the other drive. I'm thinking like, okay, Kenley gets the nod for the ninth to start the year. He gets to 450, so he gets his three saves. And then Kimbrel gets the nod and he gets to 445. And then Kenley, you give another 2 weeks, and then Kimbrel gets to 450. And then you make your decision based on how the first 2 months and how the first 15 saves went.
Just let them pursue their stats. But no, like that on a serious note, I love that idea. It would be cinema. The Marlins should honestly do that.
Why
That might
not?
be the only way to get people to show up and watch. But Kenley is just I think the higher floor option at this point.
Yeah,
Already at a 3.29 and pitches home games in a place where you don't really want to pitch, right? I mean,
yeah,
and is he trusted and leveraged like he once was? No, but I think there's a legit chance Craig Kimbrell you're like DFAing him. Like
right,
I
right.
hope that's not the case, but like that's a guy that I think you can get on a pretty cheap deal.
Yeah.
I think you go get Kenley Jansen here and my only concern I guess would be like what other teams would compete, like could the Royals offer him a more intriguing opportunity?
I think
The
Kenley would
Blue
rather live
Jays
in
offer him a
DC.
more
Yeah,
could the Blue Jays offer him a more intriguing opportunity?
right.
That's my only question.
And I think Kenley would rather live in DC than Kansas City, Missouri. No offense to Kansas City, but like Kenley, yeah, we talked about LA, Boston, Atlanta. DC is more of a metroplex.
Yeah. I think Kenley's a great like Papelbon type of
Yeah,
addition, but I think a guy that's probably going to be a lot better for the clubhouse and
yeah,
and the overall situation. And again, I think they disarmed a lot of that conversation about like his abrupt exit and whatever it may be. But
yeah,
even then, like I think when you sign with the Nationals, you're taking on a little bit of a different role. I think
right,
his time with the Red Sox probably didn't go not in terms of his performance, but just the team and the team's investment probably didn't go exactly how he was made to believe it would go when he signed there, I'd imagine.
right, right. So let's get Kenley. And then I want another veteran setup guy. Two names that came to my mind, Brad Boxberger again, but it's Paul Sewald, right? Like Sewald or Hector Neris. That was the other name that came to my mind where it's like, okay, this guy's in his, upper 30s. He's somebody that really struggled after getting, that quick deal with Chicago. He hits the market again. It feels like he could go kind of be a mentor to some of those young relievers as well. And Kenley and Neris would get along well, or Kenley and Sewald would get along well. It's like that, eighth, ninth with Jorge Lopez as well.
I like the Naris shout. I think that's
Yeah.
a good bounce back guy to try to squeeze out, a couple more years of his career. It'll be low cost, good upside play. I think that makes a lot of sense. I was also thinking like a Joe Kelly, just
Hmm.
because again, Kelly's probably looking for an opportunity where like if my stuff's playing, I I want to be able to throw in leverage and pitch my way to a better situation,
He is
or
gross when he's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
or just pitch my way into a big payday after that. He's going to be getting audition opportunities and hoping that unfortunately something happens roster wise where he gets a shot on a big league level for a more competitive team. For the Nationals, I think there's a pretty clear path to leverage,
Yeah.
and you're not signing with the White Sox and you're not signing with, one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. So
Right.
I could see either way. I might like the upside play of a Kelly a little bit
I
more.
like it more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
let's do Kenley and Joe Kelly.
yeah.
Those were Dodger
Perfect.
teammates too.
Yep,
There you
exactly.
go. Okay, so the team we didn't change a thing other than relievers, and it's Kenley Jansen, Jorge Lopez, Joe Kelly, Derek Law, Ferrer, Salazar, Lasorsa, Reifert. Cool.
Yeah, and I think another reason why you don't do anything at third base is you hope Brady House is there
Yeah. Yeah.
by June, and
Break
that
camp candidate.
he's
We talked
a
about it.
break cam candidate. I think he needs another couple hundred ABs in
Yeah.
trips, but like you hope that by June July he's up there and ready to help.
I love it. All right. I see the vision too, Nats. My last word, real quick. I was in Dallas this weekend, and Sunday morning before going to the airport, I went to the Texas School Book Depository,
The
which
what?
is the School Book Depository, which is the building that Lee Harvey Oswald shot out of to assassinate JFK,
Allegedly.
allegedly. And I was walking through the museum and realized that we paid entry to go look at the building that somebody assassinated the president out of. And they have like plexiglass. And it's like, this is how the cardboard boxes were set up for him to use as a gun rest to shoot out of this window on the sixth floor in the corner. And like, there have been millions of dollars poured into this. And that is a tourist attraction. Somebody killed the former president of the United States, and that's a tourist attraction. And I had this moment of revelation where I was like, why do we make this an attraction? Like I don't love this. What are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes you gotta make lemonade out of lemons, right?
I
Um,
guess
I'll tell you what. If something tragic happens to me, cash out on it and make it a museum.
make it a museum. Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's what he wanted. I don't know, but that is crazy if you think about it that way. I think there's like a statute of limitations, right? Like it was long enough ago where it's not weird that we're profiting off of this
But
tragedy.
like people go to Dallas and it's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see where the president got shot."
That is crazy.
You know what I mean? It's like there are people with like old newspaper like there was a guy who, there was a plaque right there aligned with the X that is in the middle of the street where JFK was when the bullet entered him. And like there's an X there and there was a guy standing right there that was like, "Do you want to see the photos of the autopsy?" And I was like, "No, man. I
No
don't really
way.
have interest." Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Like just being around Dealey Plaza, I was like, it
Dude.
feels like we've made a terrible place in American history a tourist attraction that clearly hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people a year, go to visit.
Throw on this VAR headset, and you can see what Lee Harvey Oswald saw.
Right, like there was a 3D model of the track of the bullet from the
Okay, yeah,
corner room.
that is crazy. That is crazy. Okay, yeah, I think I'm out on that. You can consider me out on that. Yeah,
I think
I
I'm out
that I
too.
I'm officially out on that. I
That was
won't
my
see that
final
in
thought.
Dallas. I like that.
Cool. You got anything, or were you the Jello
No,
bowl?
that's good.
Okay.
We've got eels from outer space, and we've got profiting off of presidential assassinations. I'll come ready to go for the next one.
Yep. Speaking of eels, great conversation tomorrow
Yes.
with EELES, Peyton Eels, who could very well be on the Minnesota Twins roster. This guy was in indie ball to start the 24 season, logged a 915 OPS in the minor leagues last year, and is a break camp candidate for the Minnesota Twins. This guy was balling out in NAIA, went to Coastal for his draft year, balled out, and has balled out at every stop in the minor leagues to this point.
I can guarantee the story is going to be a really fun one. Just a indie ball grinder from NIA. Like really excited to talk with him and look up the numbers.
Yeah.
He had a crazy year. And what's his measure? Was he five
He's
eight?
got to be 5'5".
and he rakes. So look out for that conversation on the call up. I think it's going to be a really fun one. But yeah, that's all I got.
Yep. Peyton Neal's 5'5", 180, 25-year-old from Scottsdale. Hopefully you're in the show, man, but listen to that on the call up. Every link you need is in the episode description. Again, we got our top 10 DHs in Major League Baseball coming on Wednesday, and we will talk to you then.